Hello out there, I'm Leslie Fish, filksinger, pagan, anarchist, weirdo, science fiction writer. And we're doing an interview here for Kat Joyner, my publisher.
I am the invisible voice.
We've just finished up a marathon recording session, and we're taking a break.
Yep.
We got a lot of questions while we're going through the session, so I'm here to answer them. Fire away. I grew up in a suburb.
Okay.
My dad, when he and his brother managed to get a practice, it was in the far west border of, the far west border of Newark. Just over the border into Newark from South Orange. And as soon as he and his brother had raised enough money, they moved the office out to South Orange. What had been the garage, my dad bought a new house. And what had been the garage got rebuilt into a clinic. It's made for a parking problem, but a much better paying clientele. As for growing up in South Orange, boring.
Oh, every kid says that.
But this was a terribly middle class, respectable FDR Democrat suburb, and it was boring as hell.
So, what did you do for fun?
There wasn't much to do for fun. What I did was read comic books and eat candy.
Oh, you didn't tip cows or...
Hey, until I was old enough to drive a car, what was I going to do? Walk? I had a bicycle, but I couldn't get more than a mile on that.
I walked everywhere.
And I walked down to the center of South Orange, which was, about a mile.
Okay. So South Orange wasn't that big back then.
Nope. But, there was a movie theater, but it closed it closed before I got there, before we moved in.
That sucks.
Yeah. And other than that, there was, an ice cream parlor 2 blocks away, long blocks. And, in the other direction. And in town proper, there was the library, which is my favorite haunt.
Of course.
Yeah. I must have read every book in the children's section of that library.
What was your favorite?
Oh, Albert Payson Terhune's dog stories. And Walter Farley's horse stories.
Oh, yeah.
And Ernest Thompson Seton's animal stories. Yeah.
So you liked animals, I suspect, perhaps.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was a horse nut from the time I was 3.
Wow.
When I was 3, that's when my dad took his first winter vacation in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided to take his vacations there every year after. So I came along, not having much choice in the matter. And we went to a dude ranch. Cool. We were living on a dude ranch. And of course, as soon as I saw the horses, oh wow! A little 3-year-old toddling after horses. And I'd go down the corral and try to climb in, and Mom and the rancher's wife made a point of calling me out of there. And finally, they decided the only way to get me away from the corral was to put me on a horse. So they took this, maybe 13 and 2 old pinto, and a very mild disposition. His name was Doc, and they put me on his back.
Cool.
And taught me, okay, now, when you want to stop, pull the reins and say, ho, Doc. When you go right, do this. When you go left, do that. I was enchanted. And after that, you couldn't get me off that horse. So I spent most of each day riding. And wanted to do more. I was really upset when we came home after the winter, and I had to do without horses.
Oh, yeah, that would be upsetting.
Yeah, so the parents did manage to find a riding stable not terribly far from the house, maybe 20 minutes drive. So I could keep riding, but it was only once a week instead of every day.
Oh, that sucks.
And the rest of the week was boring.
Except for the comics.
What?
Except for the comics.
Yep.
What kind of comics?
There was what we used to call a newsstand, but it was in a shop. in the center of the old town in South Orange. It was also a drugstore, and that's where they had the comics. And I would go down there, and every time I got my allowance, I'd go toddle down there and buy more comics. And let's see, what did I like? I remember I bought there's an experimental comic from this new bunch called Marble.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was, looking back, I later recognized the artistic style of Steve Ditko. But that comic, I forget what it's called, but the banner under the subtitle on it, under the title was "The Comic Book That Respects Your Intelligence," because it was science fiction stories. And one of them was the first appearance in comics of Mr. Fantastic.
Oh, no!
Yeah. Oh, if I'd still had that comic today, do you know how much it'd be worth?
I do, actually.
Oh, no, but the parents thought comics were no loss.
Could it have been Amazing Fantasy?
It could have been.
Because that was the comic book that respected your intelligence.
Yep.
Twist-ending tales of artist Ditko and writer-editor Stan Lee that had appeared in Amazing Adventures and sister titles, primarily featuring rampaging monsters. Now, do you think with the rampaging monsters that bled into your later work?
Well, I remember this one story, which, as I say, I recognized the artistic style of Steve Ditko, and where Mr. Fantastic showed up. He was not called that then. He was simply a handsome scientist, which was a real break with the traditions of the day. Middle-aged and handsome, yes, and brawny.
And blonde, I'll bet.
I forget the rest of the story, but it was something about a plaque that had an ancient plaque that could call up certain monsters, including and the antidotes for getting rid of them. The one I remember was this monstrous giant squid that was called up from the sea and began rampaging, and the antidote was the antidotes were all in riddles, and this was a weapon that wisdom can wield, but might cannot. And I forget the rest of the description, but Mr. Fantastic figured out, pour oil in the water.
Oh, God!
So
No! Mr. Fantastic wasn't so fantastic!
Well, the ship was carrying a cargo of olive oil, so it was olive oil,
okay.
not diesel.
Okay.
And they poured that out on the water, and the giant squid couldn't get enough air, so he went back down. And you see, this was a science fiction story. And I forget the rest of the story, but he did other stuff with other monsters that were called up by the plaque. And I was terribly impressed. And I started getting a serious interest. Well, actually, I had a serious interest in science fiction before then. When I was 8, I had my tonsils out. And it was painful, and I was stuck in the hospital for days.
Really?
Yeah.
I just thought you just eat ice cream and it goes away.
Well, it takes a few days to heal, raw.
Okay. Okay.
And I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't even eat ice cream, just chopped ice. And I was miserable.
Oh, yeah.
And the parents were worried enough to give me what I wanted to keep me from being miserable, so that included comic books. And, I don't know where Dad got them. He got a bunch of, quote, science fiction comic books. I suppose the word science is what made him think that this was probably a better grade of comics. And, well, yes, that gave me an appetite for science fiction. And,
so we can thank your dad.
Mm-hmm. Even though we hated comic books and later burned them.
Now, the tragedy of that is that I have read article, the people who did that didn't realize the value. Because it was more than they were going to be valuable later. Those comic books are actually what increased your reading and comprehension skills. Comic books are great for that.
Yeah, my mom taught me to read when I was 3.
Wow.
And I can tell you how she did. Well, first it helped that she sang to me. She was a musician and she had ideas. And she sang to me while I was still in the womb and every day after. Plus, she had a radio in the nursery in my bedroom. It was always tuned to a classical channel.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Very little talking, an awful lot of music, so that I used music to order my thoughts and my memory before I had language to do it. So I had the mental setup for language before I had language because of the music. And also, she would come in and sing me Brahms' lullaby every night to get me to sleep. To this day, I can remember the tune. I just can't remember any words beyond the first line. Guten Abend and Gute Nacht. Da 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 da
I
da
tell you
da.
in English.
No, she sang it in German.
I know.
The original German, so I forgot it. But
I know the English version.
yeah, but so I had music from a little before I was born, and because of the order that let me have in thinking, it was easy to learn reading. And I remember Mom strung a string of alphabet blocks across the rails of my crib, where I could bat at them like a cat. I still remember the color of those blocks. Red was A, yellow was B. But I got used to looking at the shapes of those blocks. Then once I got out of the crib and was toddling around or crawling around on the floor, a full set of alphabet blocks that had the letter, large and small letters on one side, and pictures of the different words they spelled on other sides.
Yeah, I remember those kind of blocks. I had some.
Yeah, they were very useful.
I loved them.
Me too.
Yeah, they felt good too, the way they were grooved and that they were wood.
Yeah, those grooves.
So you would run your fingers and feel the grooves, yeah.
And you could pile them up and they'd stay. They wouldn't knock over easily. So I loved those alphabet blocks. And then Mom taught me the alphabet song. A, B, C, D, da, da. And she would tap my finger on each block in turns. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then she got to telling me about the sounds that each block was supposed to have. A is the head of the alphabet because it has 3 sounds. A is an ace. A is an apple. And Ah is an amen. And so on and so forth. Each day she'd give you a different letter to memorize and tap my finger on the blocks. So it wasn't very long before I had the alphabet memorized. And then it was just a matter of putting them together. And Mom had some basic, very, very simple reading books for toddlers. And it was easy. They were easy to read because I had the alphabet memorized. And I just tore through them. And after that, it was a question of getting me more books. And so I could read comics pretty early on. I remember that the first book I read for myself was a Bucky Bug comic book.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah. I remember there was a story about, the big bag roaches from Roach Town were coming and beating up the little flies. And the littlest Bucky Bug thought of a cute way to stop them. He put up pieces of mirrors all around their encampment, so that when the big bad roaches came to attack the little flies, they saw big bad roaches face them. They'd fight them and bounce off. And I read it as far as there was one word that stumped me. One roach had bounced himself off a mirror and muttered, "These guys kick as hard as mules." Kick I could get, but mules, molest. So I finally gave up and took the book to Mom and said, "Hey, Mom, what is this word here?" "Oh, is that molest?" And she said, "No, it's because there's only one L and an E behind it, so it's mules." "Oh, mules, right, mules. That makes sense. I knew what a mule was." And then she did a double take and realized, "Oh, this is a comic book. Ick, ew, disgusting, low class." And she confiscated it and I never saw it again.
Aww.
But I remember that the first thing I learned to read about myself was comic books. And I never forgot that. I'm still grateful.